Do you believe in Sasquatch? Big D? See? He's dancing for him. The Big D, he knows about the Sasquatch. I love this. This is the funniest thing ever. I'm going to hang out with this lady that's doing some things for me. And we're going to go to a bingo and bring this along with us for pure entertainment. Welcome to the Cryptozoology Show. To the Cryptozoology Show. I have some more convincing Sasquatch films. We have some things about the Alaskan little people, aka vicious little troll guys that will take children and even adults and things like that. So pretty creepy, that sort of thing. Finally, we got a name for this guy, a little bit update on the Nunavut crawler. So this is like a new cryptid, and it's a strange, humanish, werewolfish, but with not much hair, sort of white creature of some sort, right? It's similar to some of the other, there's a strange one out there that is similar like that there's a couple that are in other cultures that have this sort of thing around there. So, I mean, they may be some mixture of something else, who knows, right? And that sort of thing like that. Mystery Lion of Africa, AI terrors so soon, no films to music will be trusted as authentic. I watched something and I watched carefully and I could still tell that there was some AI sort of things added to it. But this guy makes this wonderful sort of film where he saves a snowy owl and then this little baby and that, and he can still tell that there's some things to it, right? So, right now it is still seemingly able to tell the difference if you're really careful about it and that sort of thing. But I'd say it's extremely good, and many people would watch it and fully believe that that this guy saved these two owls and that they're all friendly with him and everything, right? So, there's something really bizarre here with that, and these. One of my favorite songs I've ever heard. I absolutely love this. You guys got to check this out. This is kind of a soul version of my legendary, one of my favorite bands of all times. I dress a lot like Angus Young, and about the size of him, right? So, sort of thing, except I have way more hair, but besides that, he's skilled on the guitar like I'm with a fishing rod, right? So that guy does his work there. But anyways, I dress like him a lot and that sort of thing like that. So I just absolutely love this band. So anybody doing them, I'm going to be critical of instantly sort of thing, right? But in this case, no, this is like absolutely brilliant stuff here. And what's really strange about it is that this guy claims it was created with AI. So I really have a hard time believing that that's an AI robot singing like that. So I don't know, man. But anyways, whoever the guy and the lady that the AI robot based it off, they kick ass. And I mean, real smoking stuff there. But it's back in black. But they did it like a soul version, and I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And you can actually understand the words a lot better. A lot of people have trouble with some AC/DC songs or many other bands where certain words, can sound like 50 zillion things, right? Like even for myself, I remember when I was a kid, there was this song, and it'll come to me. There was it was a big number one hit and sort of thing like that. Uh, oh my God, what was it? If you listen to it, it kept sounding like the guy saying this word that would fit with it, right? Sort of thing like that. But instead, it was like something else, and I can't remember the name of the song right this second, but it'll come to me there. But I'm terrible, like I said, with the names for it. I can hear the song in my voice, so a lot of times bands will, like, one of the phrases or verses or something will have the name of the song in it somewhere, right, and that sort of thing. So I'm trying to go through it and that sort of stuff like that. But I'll get back to that later. It'll come to me. But also, is our government's hiding the truth about Sasquatch and some other odds and ends of that sort of thing like that. So what I'm going to show you next here is the most entertaining thing I have ever gotten in my ever near lifetime. And anyways, we're going to ask a new AI here what if he knows anything about these secret government conspiracies and that sort of thing like that, and is Sasquatch real? Oh, another thing I wanted to talk about that I forgot to type in here, but just a little bit is the amount of shows now that are suggesting that Sasquatch is an alien or a spirit is really silly stuff here, right? I mean, okay, like you got to look at it in a logical. I can understand why some people would think this because a UFO happened to be seen around the area, but you don't know that they're not observing a primitive version of us like they do us or every other sort of thing, right? Like, so I just can't believe in my mind that some super high mighty beings from across are this intelligent and advanced. They would know that living in a swampy old cave and being full of filth and not having a bath in 18,000 years and all this would not be good for them. And I really highly, I mean, if they're that intelligent that they're flying the spaceship and coming and down to terrorize us, why? I mean, the whole thing is totally silly, right? Like, I mean, you can only find a very small amount of cases out of tens of thousands, right, of recorded. And I mean, a lot of people say there's only about 10,000 sightings. Just on posts I see all the time. I've seen this in 2 months, new ones, right? So there's way more people that have seen a Sasquatch or at least know somebody that has, or their mother or granny or somebody saw it, right? And that sort of thing like that. So there's way more out there than what you could ever possibly imagine. So, and out of all of these, very few are actually anywhere it's UFO related at all. And even so, like I say, the only logical conclusion would be that obviously they're not flying the spaceship. So even if Sasquatch is a entity from another planet, ape man, that has shot down a primitive version of us and told to go live in a cave and go, ooh, I find this really out there. So I would suspect, though, that some are captured just like we are of humans, right? And that sort of thing like that. And like I said, because I've researched this for thousands of years, I mean, if you think even in the Bible, I mean, how does this angel go through bars and does this stuff, releases them right away, and then he goes and runs, right, and escapes and that? There's interventions here, right? So these kinds of things. So that's very, again, alienish like, right? Like where the guy's beamed down somehow and done his stuff, this mighty angels, and then they zap you back out of there, right? So that kind of thing. So that doesn't mean, though, that the human was an extraterrestrial. You see what I mean, right? Like, so this same occurrence has been going on since time began of this kind of thing of captures, right? So I would presume that they would also be interested in primitive forms of us and the other life sort of species on the planet, right? Considering he created them all. You see what I mean, right? Like if you're going to follow this Yahweh version, right? And that sort of thing. But even if you don't, you want to believe it all mysteriously appeared here and we happen to just be close enough to the sun that we don't freeze to death. But if we were a little bit farther away, we would freeze to death. And if we were a little bit closer, we would burn to death. How convenient. How is it that there's a moon that's sitting right there? Like, all these weird things. I mean, if anybody really believes that there was this big thing that blew up, right? Well, that's like how big was this thing, and where did it come from, right? Like, I mean, no matter what you want to say, there's always a beginning before that, right? Like, so something had to create still this giant, thing to blow up to become all this little stuff, right? Like, all these things are silly, right? Like, so we, our ancient relatives for thousands of years keep telling us that people from the skies have come down, and in modern times, for some reason, these guys choose to not get as interactive involved with us as typical, or at least a very few, right? And that sort of thing like that. But anyways, it's just there's a lot of people that are making all kinds of books about this and videos and that are really where people believe this, right? And even some native groups and all that, they give them mystical powers and all that, but it's very logical. You have to remember that somebody 10 feet tall or 8 feet tall or 7 feet tall, whatever, right? Doesn't matter. This guy has way longer legs than what we do in arms, and they can traverse 10 times faster across these terrains than what we could, right? So when the guy, and they have ability to turn their body certain ways, and then the light doesn't reflect on their hair, these are the real ancient ones. I'm not talking about these feral mixtures that occasionally mix in with the Sasquatch phenomena that also are half and halves that somehow survived, where they took enough of the ancient form and are still going, right? But maybe higher intelligence, and that, where, because some of these groups have been reported when the guy was captured that they had fire, primitive fire and things like that. So I suspect that these were sort of half breeds, like I said, where by luck some of them survived, right? Like out of 10, maybe let's say a couple inherit the hypertrichosis and the muscular giantism and the things and the thicker feet soles and all this. Well, that guy's way more likely to make it than, Jeeves, and he's some little white cracker boy, you know what I mean, and hairless, right? And in a cold cave, right? It's not, so these kinds of things, right? But anyways, likely our government really is, purposely been doing this for a long time and actually really know the truth about this sort of thing. So, anyways, well, we got some different ones to cover here. Cat here, the Marazi. The first time I ever heard of this was this wonderful author back in the 1960s, and he had this mention of this in this book, right? And so I was always fascinated with it and that sort of thing like that. The English, they call him the spotted lion, and it's described as a lion-like cat with often a mane with leopard spots. And some cryptozoologists, different enthusiasts, and that think it could be like a mixture of an African lion and a leopard. Sightings have been reported in several parts of Africa, such as Kenya and surrounding other East African countries. Several skins were examined and shot, uh, 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 showing that the creature had spots, but seemingly of like an adult-sized cat, and they were shot in the 1930s. It was up in a mountain. I can't remember the name of the mountain, and I can't find this book right now, Gardener of Souls, there to research what the name of the mountain was. But it was, I think it was around Kenya or something, right? But anyways, they had these full, like, they were larger than, they were smaller a little bit than a typical adult lion, but much larger than a leopard, right? So in between, and the spot should have faded like at that point, like be way before that, right? So very, very interesting. Still sightings today, and that. And artificially, I think this has even been done, right? So the creature may end up looking something like this, kind of a thing, right? So very interesting. Anyways, right? You know, I love cryptic cats. I, like I said, this fellow I interviewed, he owned a barber shop, and this guy saw these three black jaguar like things, and I actually found their den. They were hiding right in the middle of the city with only a handful of people here seeing them, right, or hearing the roars, right? So these guys are very cryptid, right? And for him, for this, I presume it was a female because it had two cubs with her that were smaller, right? But like seemingly not like just born like a little bit bigger, right? Sort of thing. I don't know how fast that they grow, but like the mother had them for probably like a year or two with this sort of when they ran across them. And when I saw this den, we heard this thing roaring in there. We didn't see it, but they were there, right? And there was big footprints, like the guy said, right? And they were definitely some kind of cats of some sort, right? So, I mean, it was fascinating anyway. So, I'm a bit more a believer that things like this. I mean, there's lions even reported in several states, and even there was early lion-like creatures reported even in Canada and things. And we'll be covering next. I had mentioned this before, but I had a updated sighting from somebody that was very interesting, and apparently others have in decades here have also seen around this area. So I didn't know about this swamp area. So it's very interesting. But a fascinating cat, anyways. Gardner Soul, that was a book. He was the author and a wonderful author and that sort of thing like that. He didn't do much of that stuff. I think he'd written a couple other books that wasn't really on that subject, from what I can recall. He may have did another one, but anyways, that was the only one that I had ever read, and was one of the earlier ones I'd ever read, and I just totally loved it. It was a great book. But so if you never caught it, you'll recognize it's the correct one because he has like a gorilla, and I can see the pictures in my mind. And I think the spotted lion, the Marazi, and like a drawing of it of some sort, and a squid or crank, and some other things there is a bit blurry. I haven't seen this book in ages, but I know I still own it somewhere in some collection someplace that wasn't destroyed. So, but anyways, he was one of my favorite earlier authors, and excellent cryptozoologist type of guy. If you never heard of him and that sort of thing like that, so. Uh, but an interesting cat, anyways. We'll cover some other ones here. I mean, there's not much to cover here. It's just simply this lion is usually typically shot in higher or found seen in higher elevations quite frequently, and it looks like a lion and a leopard mixture of some sort. I mean, it could be a distinct species, some unknown lion, right, that happens to have this, or it could be, like they say, some kind of mixture. It's hard to know, right? But for sure, it probably exists, right, and that sort of thing like that. So a very interesting cat. So next year, I had covered these before, the White Death, the nightmare cat of Alaska, right? Which I fully believe. I've seen these old trapper guys, and each one doesn't know the other, and it's massive, like 80, 70 years difference here, 100 years different ones. And the guy's telling you the same thing. I don't believe that they would be able to make that up. Several were their children or some woman they were with or somebody else, and the guy grabbed him and ran off into a glacier or things like that, right? But like I said, most of them were older, sort of thing, but some are still being persistent here. Descriptions is of a large cat that's very Siberian tiger looking ish, like a sort of thing like that. And he, right now, with the more sightings are coming from the swampy areas on the edge of a place called Paxton in Alaska. Native legends know of this cat as well, apparently, right? So I mean, they even back it up, right? So a trapper in 2004 heard a large growl that he saw up in the distance, a large tiger looking white cat with lighter dark stripes that looked at him, growled, then went into a bush area and vanished, right? So that's the most recent sort of sighting. I mean, there could be others, right? Like, I can't keep track of them all here, but anyways, this is a more recent one. So I wouldn't be surprised if what I believe that because Alaska is so close to Russia and all that, that some small group from, I don't know, starvation to other factors, maybe an earthquake, who knows, like any kind of thing, might have caused a certain group of them to meander off the beaten track and then find a possible area that they can, make a niche in, and it happens to be there. And these guys have lived in low numbers ever since, right? Because I don't think there's that many of them, or they would be seen way more, right? And that sort of thing like that. But a very interesting, sort of beautiful cryptid. Anyways, I would love to see one from a distance, but not. I don't feel like being grabbed like the others there and ran off into the glacier. And I don't think I'd make a good lunch. I'm too small. So bring along some big bummers. No, I was, but all getting aside, I seriously though, like I mean, it's an interesting cat. I mean, and because there's these old trapper records and different things like that, I believe there's definitely some validity to it. And I mean, to me, that's a pretty nightmarish cat. I mean, could you imagine? Like, they're so cute. I mean, how could anybody shoot one? But I mean, if he was coming at me, or if I had a daughter, and all this kinds of stuff, right, with you and that, and the guy's gonna grab her. Well, then I got no choice, right? But I mean, uh, I wouldn't want to do it, right? Like under any circumstances, unless it was no other choice, right? Like that sort of thing, like that. But aren't they cute? They're so cute. But anyways, so fascinating another cryptid here that for sure likely exists is just really a Siberian tiger that may have even, if this happened ages ago, right? Like, I don't know how long the natives have it in their records, right? I'm pretty sure it's quite some time, but I mean, I don't know if it's like, massive thousands of years sort of thing, because if it's a more sort of like, let's say this happened 500 years ago, right? Some kind of thing that caused them to go this way, right? Something going on, right? Well, over time they may be isolated enough here to start becoming slightly different, right? So they may, like, the descriptions are funny where the stripes aren't as like prominent as like what, you know what I mean, a typical Siberian tiger, right? And also I find it interesting that a lot of the ones, they don't use a Siberian tiger as a reference to, like, you know what I mean, to say it looked like something like that. They just say it looked like a big tiger or a lion that's white, right? With some had black stripes, but there's a few accounts where it seemed like they didn't mention that. They just said it was whitish color, right? So I suspect it's something like that. But anyways, probably they exist. So hopefully, no meanies go trap them for their coats and that sort of thing like that. Oh, you're so cute. Yes, you are. So, anyways, we'll continue on. We asked Big DAI here to dance if he, like, if it's true. When admitting to, we're going to ask him a question about do UFOs exist, and also Sasquatch, or do you new kids here UAPs, unidentified ping objects, that sort of thing. That'd be a new craze, so that the UFO flies by and blasts. There was a guy like that, the Mad Gasser Bassoon, and a few others that were similar. Where this or Spring Heel Jack, the guy would like fly down and these flames and smelly gas would come out of him, right? So similar, like idea, that sort of thing, like that. So a big DAI here. He knows the answers. This is the most entertaining toy I've ever seen. Nearly, completely entertaining, like beyond belief. Anyways, we'll continue on. We just asked Big D here. It does the Sasquatch exist? And you can see here clearly that he's saying it does. So, does UAPs, those flying saucers that pee around, do they exist, Donald? See, he's still dancing. The Big D, he knows all about the Sasquatch, UFOs, werewolves. He knows about lighters, too. He wasn't really a big believer in UFOs at first. And then one time on one of the campaign trails, he ended up in Boise, Idaho, in this late night bar, and he met a couple of space aliens in there. So he's been a believer ever since. So the AI Big D here, he knows the truth. Okay, so we'll continue on. He's verified that both of these creatures exist. So sorry, Joe Nichols, you've been wrong all these years. So besides Big D there knowing what the truth is behind these UFOs and Sasquatch and little people and these different ones, right? There's a couple of interesting guys here that are, one of them doesn't even wanted to say what national park that they were in. I mean, just bizarre. But they were so nervous about their sighting that they could get in some kind of trouble, right? And the other one, uh, anyways, they're both very interesting. Here's an interview with a former government employee that was told to keep silent about seeing a few remains in a national park after a werewolf possibly had killed them. Another seeing a dead Sasquatch taken by Army unmarked helicopters for study to an air base, right? And that sort of thing like that. In 1977, a forest ranger was out looking for campers and supposed to be back 2 days earlier, right? And so when he looked around for them and that, he found a torn tent to shreds, and it had blood all over it and giant 20-inch long tracks that had huge long claws and narrowed in back and looked very much like a wolf tracks, just much bigger. So, like, what the hell, 20 inches? I mean, that's even bigger than a typical Sasquatch most of the time, right? Like, I've seen some even 30-inch sort of ones, right? But the average sort of ones is probably about, I'd say, 16 to 18, 19 inches in this sort of range, right? Like, of the average bigger individual, right? But there's some bigger and some smaller, of course, right? And that sort of thing like that, right? But it's interesting that, I mean, it couldn't have even been a Sasquatch, because it sounds like the feet is very narrow there, like in the back. And I actually, on one of my other shows, I had the old drawings still of what I saw, and I mean, these tracks were huge, man. Something was really strange there. Like, I thought maybe these guys, because I'm into this, that they were just having some fun at first, right? But when I seen this deer that like was drained of blood, man, like something drained this thing, right? And these giant footprints that was around it, and this guy, one of their relatives that didn't even know anything about it, heard this horrific howling sound that was terrifying the crap out of him, right? Because he was looking for them, but they had already left. So by the time he, was in the spot that particular time, over a few days, they kept going back and forth to this tree stand, right? So this was around Manotick, Ontario, man. you know, so really bizarre, because I saw something Titanic left those prints, and something killed a like full grown deer here and seemed to drain it of blood like some kind of vampire, man. Like, I mean, that was the weirdest thing. And that's why they called me, because they knew it was all into this. They were scared of it, right? So, I mean, but so there's some strange things that have been out there, right? But I mean, that sort of thing like that, and uh, these guys, of course, never went out and reported this out to the police or any kind of regular thing like that, because this is the thing. Look at how many people that do this kind of thing, that report this kind of stuff every year, right? From the werewolf, Sasquatch, little guys, whatever it is, right? Like, there's, let's say, a couple of thousand going on of different sorts of wacky ones, right? Okay. That's the only ones that are willing to even talk to somebody else. And most of the time, they didn't phone the police, right? And this sort of thing. Only a certain small amount do, right? And then how many people would not want to say that they saw that, right? So, like, when you get a report, I would suggest that 10 to 20 times this amount somebody like was seen than just the one, right? Like, unless it's fully made up, like some would be, right? But a lot of times it's seemingly not, like, especially certain areas have hundreds of years span in natives before it, right? So it's very likely some of them are real, and that sort of thing. And it's interesting how that it works this way, right? Like, I mean, again, if it was imagination, these certain things just wouldn't keep occurring, right? But it's always the same, right? And the same with this werewolf stuff. So even though I find it harder, me personally, to believe in a werewolf, but there's just as much of reports of them almost as there is like Sasquatch like stuff, right? So I mean, it's getting more and more common, like, as the time. So again, I suspect that there's a bunch of things that is the werewolf phenomena in some locations. If you look at an old English books, believe it or not, you'll find this that they describe not only wild men but also a monkey-like guy, right? And these kinds of one like that. So there was even not massively hundreds of years ago, right? Like a baboon like kind of guys, right? And as far as I know, early Romans might have brought some of these as like terror pets of some sort, right? And then they could have easily went to these other countries, and this werewolf phenomena it becomes because these guys may change in an environment like this, right? And I mean, snow monkeys can handle even minus like 20, 30 stuff here, right? So pretty cold stuff, right? Like they'd be able to make a niche even here around my region, right? If they existed, right? And that sort of thing like that. So it's, creatures are more adaptable than what we think, right? And it'd be very feasible that some of these Roman ones, when they brought these warrior crazy, like chimps of different sorts, right? Like hyenas or whatever, right? Like different kinds of things besides like, um, I don't know, like any kind of like, the more crazy sort of apes, right? Like, any of these kinds of ones, right? That are more vicious, like baboons or those kinds of ones. Some of them, if you never seen them before, now all of a sudden they're in your culture, and these early books describe them, right? Well, then they might perceive that as a werewolf like sort of thing, right? Because the baboons got a real pointed sort of face on them, right? And that sort of thing like that. So, you know, I always wondered that, like, because one of the skulls there that this European guy from around, I think it's Yugoslavia, someplace or something, uh, or no, sorry, around Romania. This guy actually had an ancient box there that somebody had really killed a werewolf, and the scientists not even studying it really. They just saw pictures of it. They suggested it's a wolf with Paget disease, but the eye socket seemed to be much more in the jaw features and everything, more baboonish like of a creature, right? So I've always wondered this that a ravaging, maybe they get bigger in an environment like that. Who knows, right? So let's say they could get like 5 feet tall, right, or something, right? Well, that's pretty scary, right? Like, but that would only be like a certain werewolfy sort of stuff. You also have this shook dog phenomena that's proven at least one skeleton was found that proves that a giant dog monster existed in the 15th century that was near 8 feet long, right? Like, and there's so many stories of these even to today, and of children missing and all kinds of adults even, where groups of these, they're like a junkyard dog like kind of thing, right? But they seem to be some strange mixture of a wolf and some other breed of dog, right? And that, but they were fully true and were real, right? So that's another answer of the beast de Jobadin is that a lot of descriptions sounded much more like a shoot dog than a wolf. But then, especially the first witnesses, some of the drawings were of other ones that they suspected was the beast. They killed it. The hunting, the killing stopped for a little bit, but they continued in a town just right nearby. Nobody mentions this, but there's records in almost all the towns all around of similar like things that follow or proceed the Beast of Jobadin, right? Like I've done a lot of research of this because I was fascinated by it. I believe they exist. Like this lady Maud, her family came from there, and they said that these dogs existed at one time, right? And that sort of thing like that. And even in my region here, these werewolf things. So you got that. You also have giant wolves that make a werewolf, right? Like, you know what I mean? And maybe sometimes they do stand up on two legs for some reason, right? To look up or something, right? So it would give you the werewolfy effect. But these guys are way bigger than a typical wolf. And there's really good proof of one in Saskatchewan. You see this guy's dog, and it's a decent, good sized dog. And this thing makes it look like a mouse. Like it looks like he could just, gulp him down, right? Like, and luckily the creature decided not to attack him, right? And that sort of thing like that. But I mean, there's already very good evidence that such and massive amounts of records from even hundreds of years ago of Titanic sized wolf prints, right? That are by far larger than what the scientist guy will accept, right? Like in Alaska, 8, 9 feet long sort of dudes, right? And that Northwest Territories, even Saskatchewan, and these stories go around, right? Like BC even, and of giant wolves and things. And some of these stories end up being true, like even giant bears. I saw one that's insane, man. And this was just like a regular black bear, right? Sort of thing like that. And there's grizzlies and stuff like that people have said are way bigger, right? Like that are 12, 13, 14 feet tall, right? Stuff like that, right? Like, and there's this Alaskan giant king polar bear, right? And that, yeah, there's some things about the scientific community that sometimes drives me nuts. This guy found a giant one of these bears whole skull here with the teeth and everything, and he finds it in a snowbank out there in Alaska, right? So this he said that this bear, when it was alive, had to be about 17, 18 feet long, right? But now he dates it at 100,000 years when he found it just in a blob of snow. How do you know that? I mean, that is ludicrous sort of stuff, right? Like even the Gigantopithecus, the guy says he claims that that they were extinct maybe 100,000 years ago in that. Okay, but why is it that none of these were found? They were all found pretty well in the same Asian shop area, right? So this guy doesn't know what layer they were found in or any of this stuff, right? Like, and carbon dating is very iffy, right? So these things are like, and just because you don't find a skeleton of something, I mean, there's new dinosaurs found every year, as a for instance, right? So, and then the guy finds it or whatever layer, and he says it's Cretaceous period or this or that, right? Well, that's just whatever, right? Like you the guy says, why haven't we found a Bigfoot skull or whatever, right? As far as you have many times, giants have been found in cave. There's literally thousands of these newspaper reports worldwide for massive since newspapers been around, of giant skeletons found. And the scientist guy doesn't understand that a giant guy living in caves 8, 9 feet tall probably is furry, right? Like, and matches all the Bigfootish stuff. So this is why I tell you most of the time that really a lot of them are a primitive races of giant human beings that are really apey like, right? Like more so than what, and that there's the feral Sasquatch like phenomena that's mixed in with it. There's mixtures where seemingly they have ability because they're close enough to human like us that if they do grab you know what I mean, some hottie, right, like poor Shakira, we'll use her as for instance, sort of thing, right? Like, could you imagine, right? I'm sure they'd be moored with her. I know I certainly have. But, poor Shakira, I can imagine. But anyway, she'd be walking away from that cave fast, I guarantee you. But all kidding aside, though, like there's these sort of where if they grab a bait in or whatever scenario, that it could be that out of so many, one or two will inherit the enough of the cavemanish like stuff to make it right. I like I say, I find it interesting that you never almost below zero. Okay, uh, because like I said, I'm really into historic sort of stuff of Sasquatch, right? There are so many of these accounts from Europe and United States and other countries, and even in Africa, of these wild men grabbing women and having children with them and things like that, right? And these kinds of weird things, right? There's so why is it though that the cave girl is not seen like in the group with them after, like, so how many of these women actually survive this, or the odd guy that's been jumped, right, and this sort of thing like that. There was a recent case a couple of years ago. Some electrician guys were working this fence line to make sure the electricity was working or whatever, and something grabbed the worker. They were only 2 feet behind each other. This guy was so tall that he was way over an 8 foot fence, reached his hand down, grabbed the guy, lifted him over the fence. A little bit of his clothes got caught, and whatever it was raped and ripped off all of his clothes and dragged him off. Like, what the? I mean, why would you? That sounds to me like, again, like a humanish thing here, right? Like, how would the guy know that you need to get these clothes off to whatever, right? Like, you see what I mean, right? So there's something very strange there with some of this stuff, right? Like, in that sort of way, right? And how many people vanish in these forests and all these kinds of things, right? It's very, very very strange, right? Like, and that sort of thing like that. But that how it there's stuff there that the governments or somebody doesn't want us to know, right? Like, because there definitely seems to be enough evidence out there that there's just too much of this, right? Like, I mean, the literally thousands keep occurring. Again, I'm suspicious of a lot of them in today's time. I noticed, like, all the people I interviewed, every sort of person, right? Uh, Almost zero ever heard any of this wood knocking stuff or any of this stuff. This is there's way mentions of this before that they heard, like, in the odd rare report, right? But I mean, in general, this was not a known phenomena, right? Except to natives and a few things, right? Like that they would shoot rocks at you and stuff like that. Almost none of those either, right? Now, almost every, 7 out of 10 sightings, the guy's hammer, he's wood knocking, he's shooting rocks at you, and this sort of thing. I find this slightly on the suspicious side to me, right? Because why is it that all the people that I interviewed in all these different sorts of ones, right? Always it was the same, that they either see the guy off far in the distance. The first people that I ever interviewed, I was just a tiny little kid, and I was so fascinated by this, and I would ask them every time the same story to make sure, and it never varied, right? Like Gwen and Willie, and they were from originally BC, and they worked this logging camp, and they saw when they were having their meal there, they saw this Sasquatch up on this sort of ridge on the top of this mountain, but there's like that edge thing or whatever you call that, a ridge like thing, and there was this big tree there, and this thing ducked underneath it, the big first branches, and then went down on the other side. So they were so fascinated by this that it blew their mind that they decided to go way up there and check, and they found these giant footprints there, and they measured, and that guy had to have been over 10 feet tall, because the branches was the first layer was in around that range, right? So I mean, that's wild stuff, right? And this couple really liked me so much. I think they wanted to, like, grab me, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, sort of thing, right? Like, to have as their own kid, right? So I'd say to them, "Are you lying to me?" Like, 1,000,000%. So I knew even before I ever saw that thing at Kickapoo Creek or any of the stuff that there's, and my grandmother telling me about these lake monster stuff and these different ones, right? That I knew there had to be reality to these things, right? Like in this sort of way, right? Because these people were real hippies, right? Like so. I mean, I don't believe that they could get such perfect sort of each time, right? Like I still can see them telling me the story, so I can remember it so well, right? Like I mean, it's like as if it was yesterday, right? So you know, anyways, they were a wonderful couple. They at least they were decent enough that they didn't, right? But I mean, they really wanted me as their son, right? Like sort of thing, right? Like so, I mean, they were so nice. Like I mean, but so I just don't believe that they would make this up, right? Like so. Anyways, even if I still had never seen any of those things, I would still believe that Sasquatch is real simply by the historic records and all the other things, right? But if you guys, any of us that have been with me in Quillon, Quebec, you would become Joe Nichols, I don't care who it is, would become from a skeptic to a believer instantly. Like, because any person hearing the horrific screams and the stench of this dude and the trees that he was able to rip off these great big branches, like snapping them right off that and going like the most craziest. I mean, this guy was really bad and totally insane, right? So I am glad that I'm envious of him that he's seen this. Like I seen a little guy that I didn't fully really see, like 100%, right? But this guy like saw it like he turns around and this thing pushed him, right? Like I say, I believe especially when that big and the way he was able to break those trees, if he wanted to kill him, he would have just one little and knocked his head right off. But for some reason, I believe it had something to do with him peeing. I know this sounds insane, but uh, like a dog and other things, they mark their territory, right? And Sasquatch is known to be like that sort of thing. So maybe this guy was mad that he was peeing around his spot, right? But decided to, for whatever reason, like maybe because he's so small compared to him, decided to, but whatever, right? Like I don't know, but he pushed him, right? Which was so strong that just a little tap is enough to slam a guy to a ground, have piles of these spikes of like grass and weird stuff and twigs and little stones and things that was embedded all in his jacket, man, everywhere. So that guy like really like, but he said that he just kind of went like poof, like this little thing, and he said, "Oh, my eyes sore," and he had this great big black eye, right? Like I mean, the whole thing. But if you were this dude screaming and then this guy, like I mean, you would know that they have to be real, right? Like I mean, so I like I said when I was in Kelowna, I was with three, four other people, and we were in the back in this car and going up at three others, and we all saw this more like a guy, a giant red haired guy, right? The full of fur. It looked like a human gulping water down with their hand, right? Not what a bear does, right? And it didn't look like a bear. So I can't say enough to know for sure, right? So I just, that one I have to leave blanco. I know that in the Kickapoo Creek, that this, whatever he was some ape little guy of some sort, right? I can guarantee you that he was a wild chimp man to whatever a baby Sasquatch, right? Like that kind of thing, right? Or escaped ape of some sort, right? Whatever, right? But it was something like that, at least, anyways, right? Sort of thing like that. But I mean, finding footprints a few times and other weird things, like, and all the people that have interviewed over the years and the 10 zillion ancient writings about them and everything. I mean, to discount all this, I'd have to be foolish. And I mean, I think when our world's too Joe Nicholas in that way, right? Like, I mean, you got to use logic sometimes, right? And I mean, when some guy says there's nothing to the Sasquatch phenomenon, it's silly, right? Like, I mean, you got army to every sorts of background of people, saying that they see these things. I mean, we even had a president writing stories that he believed to be real, right? Albert Osman, not Albert Osman, but Ape Canyon incident and ones like that. Like these different things. I mean, there's so much of this, right? And all this sort of things here, right? Like, I mean, for sure there's some things to it, right? Like, this other one here in like 2002, this guy working for a national park in Yellowstone, a Sasquatch was followed and then shot by unmarked huge dark helicopters. I was with this lady, and when we saw this UFO thing, that's what we saw. They were not marked, these, and I've never seen helicopters that big. So I believe this person, like, because the description sounds like even something that I saw myself. There's some kind of giant helicopters that the army owns or whatever, right? Like some group that is really big, like way bigger than any of the ones you ever see on TV and stuff like that. And they have some kind of stealthy like technology that they can hide the sound of them, sort of thing, right? Because the only reason that we even knew there was another one coming, because you could hear when it would hit this little island, there was this funny little fluttering sound like a helicopter, right? But it was certainly stealthy that I'm used to when I hear a helicopter going by that it's making a good sound, right? So I found these things really interesting to me, and that they seemed to know who this UFO was. Like they were interested in observing it and trying to chase it, right? So whatever, I don't know. Like I mean, it could have been some wild, whatever, some kind of army to whatever Air Force or something special testing of some sort, but I can't believe it because this thing went and flew so fast that I don't really believe we have this kind of technology. So, anyways, and I saw with a bunch of people a crash that if you look at the Canadian thing about it, it's all redded out, right? But about, I'd say at least 10 different witnesses we all saw these guys take out some kind of things out of there and that were in body bags, right? And there was like these men in black, like sort of guys that seemingly the army is aware of their about them, or at least high up army, right? Of some sort, right? So anyways, nobody ever talks about that. They talk about the shag armor and every time Roswell. I mean, there's other ones out there that even the thing that I seen was completely a cover up thing. I mean, you got guys in hazmat suits, uh, men in black cars hanging out there. These guys were all in black suits, exactly like the Men in Black movie. I mean, every kind of thing, right? Like, so there's weird stuff that our governments are into, right? And that sort of thing like that. But this guy too, apparently these guys shot this Bigfoot and it went over a cliff, right? And that sort of thing. And then he saw them come down with it, and then after they flew up, and the creature was hanging over these pallets of some sort that was all on this big rope stuff and netting, right? So I guess for transportation, right? So similar, like over in Afghanistan, the guy said a similar like thing that the army flew him away in a helicopter, right? But these ones were really huge, like some unmarked ones. So he doesn't even know like what country that they were from, right? And but what was really weird is that after about like a week later, he gets this strange guys come to his place, right? And they were all like it was funny. They were like more like army suits, but black. So that's what confused them, right? Like, usually the men in black guys, like what we saw down there, were like more like the movie portrays. They seem to have like all black, nice, fancy suits, right? And that sort of thing like that. But uh, these guys, what he saw was different, like as if they might belong to the army of some sort. So who knows? But I'm telling you, Men in Black really are real, like guaranteed of this. Like I saw these guys, right? Like there was a group of them hidden blocks away from all the rest of this gang, and only one car that was smaller than all the other ones. They were all the same except this one, and this guy seemed to be more cheapy, like he was the bigwig, and some guy got out of the car that was one of these Men in Black guys. That's the first time I could see the suit really well when the guy went to go in it, because the lights were there better in this area where they were hiding underneath these trees. And there was at least about 7 or 8 of these big long limos and this guy. And once he got him in, then they went to this ambulance where these body bags were, and everybody surrounded this thing, and they prevented police and ambulances outside. They never had to speak to them. They got no information. And I've never seen an ambulance move so slow in my entire life. It was like 15, 20 minutes here just to move not even a block. This is how slow this guy was going, with all these army trucks all around it, right? So nobody ever talks about that, but there was a crash here in the Gatineau River, and this thing that was a glowing orange, weird sort of thing, and it had this little flickering light that was in it, right? So whatever it wasn't like monstrously huge, but it certainly wasn't a meteorite. It wasn't any normal plane or any kind of thing like that. And the speed of this thing was insane. So I really suspect that these guys were looking for that craft, and I think the craft survived it. I think that these guys went because we found depressions in the area that normally was not there, exactly where they were diving around and collecting this stuff, right? So I think that this UFO thing somehow survived the crash, bounced in the bottom and made like some kind of debris there, and maybe a few little pieces busted off, but not enough to do them in. And these guys, whatever was flying it, just kept going underwater and then flew off someplace else, right? I would, because it was very strange. Like, it seemed that they knew there was nothing more down there, and it would have only taken us about a half an hour from when we seen this thing fly past us. We said, "Oh my God, what is that?" And like we were totally blown away by it. But it went over the tree line, and so we didn't realize that it crashed on the other side of this tree line, right? So by the time we got there, all these guys were already there. So how did they know that quick, right? Like, there's so many suspicious things to me still to this date of that one, right? So I'm pretty sure that a flying saucer of some sort, kind of craft, crashed in the Gatineau River, and they may have collected some little parts of it, but somehow this thing went away, or that they actually really got it. But if they did, they must have removed this vehicle fast, because all we saw was them remove 2 body bags that had something in them, right? Like, where they were bodies or parts or whatever. I haven't a clue, right? But anyways, Men in Black exist, whether people want to believe that or not. Guaranteed they do. Right? Like 100%. There is some secret government agency of some sort, and they may have like different modus operandi, like sort of things where, like, if you're to confuse you, like a lot of them dress like a normal Men in Black thing, but then maybe other times they do it in some weird dark way in some other outfit to, I don't know, like some, yeah, because it could maybe not necessarily all of them. Like, if it's a UFO thing, maybe they stick with this normal suit, like, sort of way that they do things, but maybe like if it's other sort of phenomena, they'll do it in a slightly different way, right? And I mean, I've heard these stories so many times of later the people are threatened, right, by either their government superiors or some wacky guys in Men in Black, two different ones, or they're in a black suit or something, right? Like strange individuals that come to their door, right, and then threaten them pretty well, right? Like, so where who does this? Like, where does these guys come from, right? so, so I'm gonna have to ask Donald there. We'll get him recharged up, the Big D, and ask him the secrets there. Maybe this there's an AI. Hidden thing inside there besides his amazing disco dancing abilities. That is the funniest thing ever. On the box, it says super disco dancer or something like that, right? Like, I mean, did they ever like rip him off, right? Like, yeah, obviously, I doubt they're paying him any royalties for it, right? But it was one of the funniest little toy gifts you could ever like. I totally love it, right? So, yeah. I like the dancing. I like the music. Just the whole thing is. So I think he's going to be great luck at this bingo. He's a billionaire. This guy money just flows and gravitates to him. So I'm hoping he'll gravitate to me and this lady here. So her Christmas for kids are better, and mine is as well. So I'll try out this bingo for entertainment there, but with Magic the Big D. But you got to admit though that like even with these guys here, right? Like these forest ranger and different stuff, there is wacky stuff out there, right? Like that is very strange, right? That these forests and some of these government agency, there's funny things going on there, right? That I don't know. Like I believe that they know that Sasquatch for sure and space alien like things exist. I mean, like I said, to me, the silliest people ever. How any billionaire would give them one penny. I would never give them a penny in a zillion years. Is SETI. I find them the most silliest organization that's ever existed. I mean, you're paying a bunch of people to monitor because they're so thinking in their mind how great in advance they are that nobody would be feasible able to fly from the galaxy and all this. They've been doing this way before SETI existed, for since time began here. Ancient people they've been visiting, so they SETI chooses to ignore hundreds of thousands of ancient sightings to millions today of UFO like phenomena, right? And that nobody has ever seen a flying saucer or whatever, and they couldn't reach here. And but if we monitor, maybe we'll be able to hear a sound of them from outer. The most silliest. So, however, they convince people into this in the first place is like mind-boggling. It's just a mass scam to get a group of people to do not much. To I guarantee you, the Yahweh guy, whatever, any space aliens, any of this sort of stuff, if they don't want you to know they are around, then they have the ability to do that. Right? So, I mean, the whole thing's silly, right? Like, it's a complete waste of time and resources that could have went to better value, right? Like, because you these guys, if any of this stuff is true, the Bible and all these different ones, right? These guys made us. They already created us. They know all this stuff. They know how to hide. They know in that. I mean, in the Bible, I mean, why people don't see this? I mean, I find them blindish in a lot of ways. Like it says, uh, the angels are in chariots, right? And the Lord is amongst them in a bigger chariot, right? Like I mean, chariots, right? That flying a working vehicle, right? Like I mean, people seem to have a problem with this. I don't at all. It doesn't matter if the guy's supernatural or not. The guy made like I said, like for King Solomon, right? He makes a ring with his mighty name Yahweh inscribed on it, and the 7 stars or whatever, the jewels on it, whatever that this ring might have looked like, right? And that this guy does makes things all the time. So if you now was like you, like I said, my mind, I wonder, like, does he really mean that the planets and everything was here, and what he created was life on them by manipulating the systems and knowing how to do different things to then bring like life onto it, that if you got these certain conditions life can thrive, right, and all that sort of thing like that, right? So but I mean, you could look at it many ways, right? Like in this sort of thing like that, you could take it literally that he created every single planet floating around here or all that stuff. Like, I mean, it's hard to know these things, and I don't personally care. I mean, what does that have to do with, like, at the end of the day, the guy is still like the boss, right? I mean, like, this is the ancient alien guys. I mean, every week is always, it's not God, it's a space alien, but it's the same thing. I mean, you when you're an ancient people and you interpret that, right? We're the ones who make up like this God stuff, right? Like the guy tells you he's your creator, he leaves you a set of instructions for that. That is God. Like it doesn't matter how the guy himself was created or any of the things of that, because that's like not even fathomable almost, right? Like I'd imagine it must have been quite the ride, however he would have been created, right? And all that sort of thing. So that would take you another zillion years to figure that out, right? But I mean, no matter what, you have a mighty race of beings out there that are much more powerful than we are, and we have way more advanced stuff, right? So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that, of thanking them one way or the other, whether whatever a spirit is or any of this stuff. I mean, this is all people's interpretations, right? Like, you can't prove any of these things, right? Like in that sort of way, right? Like, I mean, yeah, but I mean, ancient history tells you flying chariots, flying discs, flying ships. They all telling you that they see like a big orange bowl in the sky, and they'll describe it like a flying dragon and all this kind of stuff, like a flying dragon. The ancient alien guys and all them, they always ignore this sort of stuff. They'll try and say that a dragon was like a spaceship from outer. That's totally silly. The one has nothing to do with the other. They're just using it as a reference, right? Like, I mean, you a plane, right, is like a bird. I mean, or any, like, that doesn't mean that the guy was flying the bird necessarily, right? Like you just, they're using like any kind of thing that you'd be familiar with to give you an idea what it might have looked like, right? So certain things that they say, I mean, and they seem to like always the like, that's not God, these are space aliens. It's people make the thing of God, like in the way that you're the different religions and how you're going to pray and all that sort of thing like that. But the guy himself, he just tells you that he's like the boss here, right? And he never tells you that there's not other gods or other sort of mighty ones out there. There is. I mean, this is a mass misconception here, right? There's all kinds of mentions like that where he has these throne of advisors. Why would you need, if you really like, why would you want advisors if you're you see what I mean, right? Like to me, the guy's just like the boss, right? Like, so the bosses have advisors and they have all kinds of stuff, right? And they like to have a nice office, right? So his nice office is a big spaceship. I don't have a problem with these things. Like, in my mind, I'm amazed that people don't see these things, right? Like, they always tell you the same thing. They flew from the skies in a mighty chariot. The guy comes down, he's angel. they talk to you, they do this and that, they affect man's sort of thing, right? Like, so they influence us, whoever these guys are. And besides the Yahweh guy and angels and all these kind of guys and these demons and these whatever, all that sort of group, I suspect that there's all kinds of other characters out there. They're out in this universe that this guy just happens to be the boss of all of them, right? Like, but that doesn't mean that all minions listen, and we could be being affected by all kinds of other sort of life forms out there that also visit here, right? I mean, and certain things like that. So there's all I know is that for sure the government covers up a lot of stuff about UFOs and seemingly Sasquatch as well. I mean, why would a government agency return, as for instance, uh, uh, Peter Bird one time, he had sent in this sample like in the 70s, and all of a sudden they send it back to him and tell him it's a deer. I mean, come on, really? Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure he even knew what a deer hair looked like back then, right? Like, I mean, this guy already was a legend, hunting the Himalayas and all these kinds of things, right? So, yeah, a real decent character, and really, yeah, the one of the greatest horsemen of the Sasquatch like phenomena, right? And that sort of thing like that. So I mean, he did it all, right? Like, I mean, and somehow this guy managed to always get funds, right? He had skill for this sort of thing like that. I talked to him quite a few times over the years, and he was really nice, right? Like that sort of thing like that. And, uh, especially Reddy. I loved his accent and the whole sort of thing of this, these ones, right? But um, when Roger Patterson, I talked to him before he died, and Bob Gimlin, right? So I talked to all like the most of the ones that was, you know what I mean, had any sort of Ivan Sanderson and even Bernard Hoopelman's once and that sort of thing like that. But these guys were like truly, and like people like him, right? Like when you have like collect all this sort of stuff, these guys, they knew even way back then. I read in early books, just like even like what's her name's Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. They give you these tips. Don't, you know what I mean? Like wreck the whatever the evidence, right, by touching it and things like that. Like grab it properly with something that doesn't have your fingerprints all over and put in a bag, right? So these guys were already doing stuff like that. So why is it that each time then the guy cuts it back and says it's something that it's a bear or it's a moose? But these are all common hares, and a lot of times when these things were found, they just suspected that it might have belonged to the Bigfoot because he was seen around there and he finds some hair or so. But I mean, some have never been identified. Many are, they say they're human or humanish like, right? Very close. You're admitting that some kind of obviously like human like Bigfoot guy did actually leave hair there, right? Like, so the odd ones will give you these statements that, especially if they're from private ones, so maybe the government doesn't have as much reach, right? But anything government wise, these guys and other ones that I've interviewed and people that I've listened to on other interviews with other people, uh, they're all telling us the same thing, that the government tells them to, keep your mouth shut or else, right? Sort of thing, like threaten some, uh, reciprocate, like sort of stuff going on where, they're gonna make you pay for it, right? So I find these things really interesting and that sort of thing like that. I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, even for the biggest Joe Nichols skeptic or any of them out there, if one story since the Bible to today of the gazillions of witnesses of that was true, right? Then yes, a Bigfoot guy existed at least at one point, right? So that's the thing is that how anybody could keep discounting this is too much, right? Like I said, right? And that's sort of thing like that. So very interesting. Anyways, next year we'll go on about the Nunavut crawler there and a few other sort of ones. But I mean, I just find these things very interesting that time and time again, the same kind of like stuff goes on here where the government tells the guy to keep his mouth quiet and don't say much and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you know. So, I mean, there's something very suspicious going on. And like I said, I know I saw like a UFO crash. I didn't see it crash in the water, but I saw it fly over the edge. Then I seen the guys there, and then they tried to blame it. They said it might have been a meteorite. It wasn't a meteorite. I guarantee you that. Right? Totally silly. So I mean, this thing was triangular, strange shaped, right? And it had this one little flashing light, and it looked like the whole thing glowed of like real power that I don't even think we had. Maybe today you could do this stuff by like this is like the oh god, this was in the maybe 80s or something like somewhere in there, maybe early night. I can't remember it so long ago, but it's I'm not never been good with years, but I mean yeah, I'm thinking yeah, it was yeah, it couldn't have been the night. It was in the 80s, I think this happened. But anyway, the uh I'm not sure exactly what year, right? But it was in the summer months, right? And I could be able to find the old newspaper reports about it and get the exact date, I guess. But I mean, what we saw was like, I mean, I was with like three brothers, right? And this people and watching this, and there was couples smooching in different boats and stuff that also watched some of it, right? Like, so, I mean, there was something wild going on there, right? Like that the government really covered up fast, right? And that sort of thing like that. So very interesting. But they didn't know we existed because they couldn't see us out. Like when you look out that way from there into the darkness kind of hides these boats, right? Because there's no lights out in the center of the river or that kind of thing, right? But back then, like sort of thing, right? So, but I mean, it was very interesting anyway. So, like, you can be skeptical all you want, but I guarantee you that really men in black do exist. They're whatever they are. I haven't a clue, right? Like, but to me, they must have something to do with the government, or at least the government knows of their existence, anyways, right? And that these governments in these national parks and these people that manage sometimes, if there's strange deaths that they don't want to deal with, right? They'll give some mundane, ridiculous answer and then push it. Hopefully, it goes away, right? So you got to makes you wonder, right? Like, so, but anyways, we'll continue on. I wanted to just cover a little bit about this. This is creeping me out. I mean, there's secret politicians in the Canadian and U.S. and other countries, right, that are passing these laws that we're not even familiar with much. I just found a new one, the Canadian one, so I can imagine how much these Carney kind of characters got slipped a few bills to get this done. That they'll have this 70% fleet of robot AI robot trucks. So they got all these weird laws too that if the thing hits you or does anything that you're not going to collect as much like and all this kind of stuff, right? So these guys, these billionaires are sort of doing all this kind of wacky stuff and get the politician guy to write a bunch of laws and everything without you really realizing what's going on until it's too late, right? There was a case over, at first I thought it was an urban legend, maybe not real, but I did find the original Asian news reporting. It seems to be legitimate that this a bunch of AI robots was in this mall and they killed over 20 people. Right, like so. I mean, very creepy, right? Like they just went nuts and started using some kind of weaponry that they gave them, right? So again, some guys programmed this, but these guys, this Musk guy and all them, they keep trying to say, "Oh, we wouldn't know what they would do. It wouldn't be our like." They're trying to keep you hypnotized for years. That before they fully release them, that don't even bother suing us. we're not responsible sort of thing. It's the AI's problem, right? Like, and all this kind of stuff. So we got to be really careful of this. These crooked guys, I mean, if you can get an AI robot for 100,000, right? And then 20,000 maintenance a year or some kind of schemy thing, right? Well, then, sort of thing like that. Well, then after like a few years of investment, right? The now is paid for the regular worker. Now it's all freebie after that, right? Like except for this 10,000 maintenance fee, let's say, right, to keep it going, right, and that sort of thing like that. So you could see like all kinds of businesses from the Rotten Roddies to any of them out there would be right into this, right? Because now they can have this AI automated thing. There's no employees. They can keep it open 24/7. It's a robot making it, and that sort of thing, right? Like in the UK, they're already taking this a little bit more serious, and they're banning like any further development of AI and all that sort of stuff. That's what they want to do, right? And that's so. I mean, people got to think about this. Even in the Bible, there's this one part with these locust monsters that you can't kill. That sounds kind of something like that, right? Like I mean, that would be feasible then because like even if you blew the guy half up, right, with some kind of bomb or whatever, there's parts still there, right? So then the guy would they'd be able to put him back together. So theoretically, they don't die, right? Like in the general sense, you just need to replace a part, right, and get it back up and running and that sort of thing like that. So that would make sense, kind of, right? Like compared to the people's imagination that it's going to be a real locust monster that somehow you can't harm or whatever. Like it sounds a bit like, but if it was something like that, right, it would. And it matches all these things, right? It says too, like at the end times, that everybody around the world will know when something's occurring, and that many of them won't believe what they're seeing, right? This AI stuff. I mean, everything it matches, and this is the only time in history when the internet started coming that you know what I mean, you could do this where you could broadcast all across the most remotest villages and everywhere. So it is true that at least a vast majority of the world's going to see it. I mean, I think that's what it meant. Not every single human being. I mean, there's going to be a guy in a cave right that moment that doesn't have one or whatever, right? Like, yeah, you know, but they just mean in general that a vast majority of them would be, yeah, you know, everybody's going to know this, right? So you got to think about these things. They're very important. I kibosh any businesses that start doing this kind of thing. I did go and see this robot. We have already one here. Apparently, there's whole robot restaurants in Toronto and other places, right? So, I mean, they're creeping up on us without people realizing. I did find it amusing. I must admit it was entertaining. I can certainly see why somebody would want to have their own pet AI robot and all that. But if you do this, these crooks are just gonna like nobody will have a job here and all the different levels, right? Like I mean, you know, replacing doctors and nurses and all this kind of stuff with these ones yeah, and every kind of a field, right? Like truckers and drivers. So what will be next, right? Like and that sort of thing like that. So, and I mean, these things are not infallible. One of Musk's cars was on a ship and it got confused and drove right over the thing, right? You know, sort of thing like that. Another one ran somebody over, this kind of stuff, right? Like, so these guys will they keep pitching you how they don't know what'll happen, they're not really responsible, they want you to be hypnotized while they're passing these laws to already convince you to never even think about suing them if they're one of their cars run you over, right? Like so these guys are, you know what I mean, building the empire before they're fully releasing it, right, and that sort of thing like that. So whatever you do, I mean, kibosh this stuff. I mean, I think the English are right here. It's very amusing, it's entertaining, but I think this should only be used for like a nurse like AI to go out in a field where there's bombing and everything and be too dangerous for human, army like sort of stuff, that kind of thing, right? But not for the general public, to for rotten Roddies to, get rid of Abdul and Big Betty and all that sort of stuff, right? Like, they're just teenage dodo heads, right? That need a job, right? And need to get themselves new jeans and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, so we're going to destroy everything if we, even though they're tempting and they're entertaining, we really shouldn't be doing encouraging any businesses that have this kind of thing. And if they too much of that, you go to some other competitor that the guy still has humans, right? And and then like, I mean, the dollar stores actually got rid of those robots that they had in there that was accepting everything because they were losing more money, right? Because sadly, the Canadian government doesn't allow them to shoot out a laser beam at you and disintegrate you for not paying proper change and all that sort of things, right? Or not marking the item on the scanner. So a lot of places get rid of them because they find them actually more cost at the end result because the amount that people will. The guy goes to scan it. Sometimes it doesn't scan. He doesn't realize that. So even honest people, the items are missing, right? All to save a buck, right? So these criminal guys, right? So now they've already been burned. And so, but of course, this is a new generation stuff where it's an actual real robot, right? That's going to say hi and everything to you and give you the change and everything. Well, then these guys may go for this again, right? Like these newer versions, right? So, anyways, very scary stuff. Hopefully, they don't do it. I don't go to Ron Ronnie's anyways, so it wouldn't bother me one way or the other. But I would feel sorry for all the kids and older people that take this as some kind of extra income. And all these crooked characters would be right into this, right? Like, yeah, Microsoft already did this, got rid of piles of programmers and all kinds of workers to have way more AI guys, so nobody's responsible, right? We're waiting for Bill to tell us about this new deadly disease that's coming. So they'll once they get all the AI robots in there, they'll make everybody sit at home like slaves and all this kind of stuff. So, anyways, we'll continue on here, but I mean, I just wanted to mention how like creepy this stuff is becoming. Where I'm watching videos and I'm having a hard time from reality to that is fake, right? Like I mean, sort of thing like where just little things finally get you where they don't seem to be good enough to do it yet 100% convincing, but there's they're getting better at this, some of these guys, right? So very interesting. Talk a little bit about one of my favorite things, the Alaskan little people and all over the world, right? Find them totally fascinating. The Atacama Munchkins, and the list is quite a few here of actual real skeletons and things that proves that little humans actually existed at least at one point. And I finally found the origin of this photo, and I'm going to do another show about this. The ancient alien guys, everybody goes on about Roswell. Roswell's nothing to this crash. I found the original newspaper article. The lady's even way more clearer and everything, and it is extraordinary. That is not a doll, folks. That really was a crashed little person in some kind of space ship of some sort, right? Like so. Anyways, that lady there, the ones that they're that's holding, this is a super old photograph. It was from a crash in the early 1950s. And I'll do a whole show about it. Don't have the article with me on these ones that I'm using. It's on an older one that I found this, and I found the original newspaper article for it. And this body and a couple other ones apparently were recovered out of this little small spaceship that wasn't very big, right? And that sort of thing like that. And if you see this, it's impossible that was a doll. We didn't have in those times that stretch Hulk Hogan stuff that they first came out with and these different things, right? They didn't have these kinds of materials. That's not a doll. So therefore, it was a living entity. Now, you could argue and say that they claimed it was a space alien, but it was really one of these little, yeah, dwarf ladies or something, right? It's a female. She and what's interesting about them, they actually wear clothing like what we would, right? And this sort of thing. So I find that very interesting, right? And that sort of stuff. Here's another one there with the Nazis taking off one of these alien gray guys, right? But I actually found the origin of this story right to the T. Nobody talks about this. I've never seen it on Ancient Aliens and everything, and it's way more convincing than anything. I mean, if you the crystal clarity of there's another photograph that they have with the same alien lady, but she's with some. I'm trying to remember it here. I haven't seen it in a long time. I just found it the one time, and I went right into the article. I wasn't, massively going into that aspect of it. I was because I was saving it for a whole show, right? And then I was going to really analyze it well, right? But and break it down and that sort of thing like that. But anyways, eventually I'll get around to doing a show about this. And this is the most convincing sort of thing I've ever seen, besides what I saw that I was mentioning there about this crash that, from the Gatineau there. I didn't see an alien, but I did see body bags that seemed to have things in it. I've seen the wackiest characters you've ever seen, and I've seen real men in black people, right? Like, so they exist. Like, I know that, yeah, whatever. I know I could pass a lie detector test, so I wouldn't care, right? And that's just what we saw, right? Like, so all I know is that I don't believe that it was a spaceship being tested or any of that stuff. This thing was speed of unbelievable, way faster than any meteorite could ever go or any of this stuff, right? So whatever this thing was, I really suspect actually just crashed in the water, but somehow survived that and busted off maybe a part of something or whatever, but enough for the ship to keep going and away they went, right? So because like I said, it couldn't have taken us longer than half an hour. And these guys were already there, well in the water and everything. So they must have been on this in minutes, like seconds, right? Like sort of thing. So how did they know about this, right? There is weird stuff that they're not telling us, right? Sort of thing like that. But this is one of two authentic photographs of the same little lady here, right? I would just love to meet her. Like, can you imagine if she was really that wasn't a space alien? They captured a leprechaun lady as a princess, a leprechauness, right? I would love this more than anything in this universe to sit with one and ask them like how they hide, do they live underground, what do they do, and I would especially love to have like a guest star like Joe Nichols. I would enjoy this more than anything in the planet to see that guy's face, him, like the shock and it would just, his whole mind would overload with that he cannot believe what he's seeing, right? Like, because certain people just can't like deal with things that sounds too strange to them, right? But I mean, reality, little people exist, right? Yeah, like I said, these Atacama munchkins, and some scientists now has this theory that the parents had real bad luck where about 50 different weird diseases all transferred to make the munchkin person, and then they kept the gene and kept making more munchkins. So that's their explanation, right? I mean, and even if so, it doesn't matter. These ancient stories of all these people telling you that these little people exist, right? They do. And apparently even space alien one types of them, right? So I mean, very interesting. But anyways, From native tribes to local residents for centuries have reported, like the giant hairy man, they call them, right, to also the micro little people, right? Numerous tales abound of abducted children to women by them. Numerous native tribes have different names for them. And what's really interestingly is even the native culture, like around there, referred to themselves as the real people. Okay, like so I find this really interesting that uh, how do I say this? Okay, it's strange that the way that they're trying to say this is that, in other words, they're the only what you would call like, civilized, real. The other ones are all very distinct and some kind of weirdness to them, right? Like, so, like they're the only ones that are like what you'd call real sort of people, right? And they have this in this culture about these little, hairy guys, right? And that sort of thing like that, right? And I mean, they're typical anywhere from 2 to 4 feet tall, and they're covered with fur, a human to monkey like face, and but not as furry, as well as superhuman strength, and sort of thing like this. Like, I mean, these guys are so strong that they'll run off with people, even a full adult, and apparently they live like up in these either caves that are made by glaciers and things like that, and also real caves with rocks and that, and also seen like in valley-like areas and for very thick forests in certain regions and that, where possibly they may have like underground sort of things, right? And that sort of things, right? And I mean, you have these little people everywhere. The Menahudi. I mean, the list goes on. There was the San Pedro mummy there, right? And I mean, the guy was real. There was real X-rays done of him and everything. And this guy was really like an old man, right? But at first they tried to say it was like some, totally ridiculous. The guy had full teeth and adult size and all this stuff, right? But they were still trying to say he was like an unborn infant, right? Like, I mean, totally ridiculous, right? Like, but these guys, they try stuff like that because if they don't want to put on paper that, yeah, this is a real miniature human being. Therefore, then the Smithsonian has to admit that all their scientist guys for the last few hundred years are all dodo heads, and that they, I mean, didn't realize that these guys are around them, right? Like, so their pride won't allow this kinds of things, right? But I mean, it's very interesting how it works, but there is definitely some very strange sort of things that go on that there's a lot of politics to this sort of stuff. It seems, you know what I mean? Like you have this constant, seemingly upper head dragons that will um, poo-poo this kind of information, right? And you're going to get yourself in issues sometimes if you report this stuff, right? And I mean, I watched this interview with David Childress. I like him. I'd like to meet him sometime and do an investigation. I think him and Giorgio, I think these kind of guys would be lucky with me. Like, I would bring this extra luck that they would need because I seem to always attract the most wackiest shit, right? Like, no matter what occurs, it, it the weirdest stuff on earth. Like I mean, if you don't believe there's a big guy in the sky and weird things like that, okay, uh, I've been holding out for months. I needed a new life jacket. I needed a bunch of different sorts of things, right? And this girl that I met, uh, we started hanging out, and that nice lady in her 40s and that, and that, and she says she tells me about this wacky store where they have these discounts from Amazon and all that. So we end up going to this sort of thing. Every single thing that I got even a thing from Timu that they screwed me, and if you try and return it, they give you this like it's because it's a higher end item. So lo and behold, a fluke in a million. Here's one in the bin, right? So I get this thing for $1.99. So I got all these sort of like the odds of each of these strange items all being in the same place at the same time is astronomically bizarre, right? Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, sort of thing, right? Yet all this occurred because I said, man, I need to get this stuff somehow, but it's by like and all the time to get it and everything, and you're recovering and all these kinds of things, right? And all this stuff just occurred like in seconds, right? Like, so it's weird how it works, right? Like, so it seems like there's somebody out there or something that manipulates what things that happen to us and all kinds of stuff, right? Like, because I still find that like the odds of that is really remote, right? Like, but I mean, if people do really have destinies and different things like that, if certain things are needed or meant to be or whatever, somehow they're provided, right? Like, so so but anyways, very, very, very interesting, right? But I'll do another show on this little lady here, and I find her one of the most astonishing proof of a real extraterrestrial, or at least little leprechauness, little lady, troll lady of some sort, right? Like, so no matter what, if one exists, others would, right? Sort of thing like that, So, but very interesting, anyways. Like, it makes you wonder, like, our world is so mysterious. But could you imagine, like, going and you would be able to talk to one of these little ladies here, or little people, and them telling you all this wacky stuff? I mean, it would be the most fascinating thing on earth. And especially if you had some hardcore skeptic with you, and you could see the poor Joe Nichols's mind imploding with with shock here with this space alien lady that he's now has to admit is real, right? Like, sort of thing. Like, so I mean, I would find that extremely amusing. Now, this is very interesting. You're going to find this. I find the odds of this so slim that it's like, if you talk to some mathematician person, I'm sure they'd be able to figure it out. It's got to be in the mass, like hundreds of millions to one sort of thing here, that this would occur. Okay. So, in a place called Teller, two hunters, as the stories go, climbed up a mountain. When they looked below into a meadow like valley, they saw little people that were stacking caribou. Like stacking caribou, and they're little people, right? Like caribou are a small creature, they're pretty big, right? They were so strong that they could lift the caribou over their heads and walk away with them. I mean, holy mackerel, man. So it's like mini Bigfoot guys, right? The hunters thought that they could be dangerous, these little people, so they just kept observing them, right? Now, get a load of this. This is really strange. I call it the Rip Van Winkle effect here, okay? It ended up that their friends, and when they went back to the village, right? It ended up that all their friends and everything had either passed on from old age or that, and barely anybody remembered them. But one of them did, right? And this sort of thing like that. And the tribe had thought for ages that they had just, because they never returned, that they were dead, right? So how is that? Okay, Washington Irving based this on real events. This was supposedly real tales that were told around that really supposedly occurred, right? Okay. They weren't like made up in the general sense. You could still say it's a fable or an urban legend with not a fact base. You could say that, but you can't prove that. And the other way could be totally real, like they said. And there was these little people, they still report them in the Catskill Mountains, right? And they play this nine pin, and people hear this weird, like as if they're rolling of pids at night and echoing in the mountains and that sort of thing like that. But how is it that a tribe from Alaska tells you that little people somehow can cause time to like something weird here, right? And why is it that they tell you the same thing, that the guy comes back, the villagers, and there it's the same thing. All of them grew old, like as if this guy's disappeared for decades. How is that? Does these little people, are they actually really space aliens that like this crash lady, and somehow they your time memory, like maybe they kidnapped you and then let you go later. But when you first saw them, like once you notice them, maybe they do something like that to prevent the human from, yeah, catching them or whatever, right? Like some kind of weird thing, right? I mean, I find this bizarre. Like, what would be the odds that the same thing you both have random where witnesses ran into little people, then all of a sudden time went by, and now they reappear one day and come back. This has happened over in Europe. There's another story that I mentioned. I can't remember if I mentioned it in one of the shows or not. If I didn't, it was this very fascinating early case uh, that it defies like logical explanation unless they're telling the truth. This village over somewhere around Poland, someplace or something, right? This strange village. This disc came down, and one of their residents, this guy, uh, like goes in it, right? And then when he comes back, all these people are all way old. Nobody remembers them barely or nothing, right? The same weird sort of thing, right? Like so. I mean, like there's something to this, man. Like so, if the origin of some of the little people at least seen right are not actually indigenous little people but actually like visitors from the skies, right? Like that little lady there supposedly, right? Well then that would then explain that they would have the ability to zap the guy where these people don't remember for a while, and now all of a sudden you've done your experiments with them or whatever, you let them go, and they only remember from that part on or something, and before that, like you were raised somewhere in middle gray area, right? Like it'd be feasible, right? Like that sort of thing like that. But I just find this Rip Van Winkle effect. I could find dozens of stories like this, bare minimum, and there may be way more that I recall over the ages where people have lost track of time or strange things where they've appeared in a place like much later and in strange like sort of things, and sometimes they have some of the stories have something to do with running across a small little person be previous to that or a group of them or stuff. So this is weird, right? Like I mean, it's a side phenomena besides little Atacama munchkin guys that live out in the desert and live in caves, right? That are mini Bigfoot dudes, but only like 6 inches to a foot tall, sort of thing, right? That sort of idea. You got these kinds of different ones, right? But I mean, there may also be like a space alien, like seemingly version, like that little lady, right? So I mean, whatever the case, I mean, very interesting. There is actual factual, real physical evidence of some of these ones, right? Now, the scientist guy can give it all his imagination of how this occurred, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they still exist. So the people were telling you the truth, right? The Inapiaka tribe. To thousands of Alaskan natives have different tribes. To residents still see them up to this date. All right. Okay. So I mean, very creepy. Like I mean, they're strange. They're like little, and I mean, you get the same stories all through Europe, everywhere. The same thing, the same little dudes, right? And that. So in this case, instead of the Bigfoot guy instead of the Bigfoot guy flying around like a space alien, I don't believe this. I believe they're aliens monitoring a Sasquatch guy. This I could believe in certain circumstances, right? But to suggest that Sasquatch is a space alien or a spirit is, yeah, I'm not going to get into any disagreement with any native groups if they want to believe that. That's their thing, right? Like, but and I'm not going to knock. How do I know 100%, right? But I know that in the 99.99%, including my experiences with these kinds of things, this was a physical, real animal person, right? Like not that kind of thing, like the way they make it, right? And I can't imagine that an advanced race is that intelligent to fly across the world, and that wants to stink up a storm and live in a cave and go ooh. It's totally silly, right? Yeah, but it would be very logical that Sasquatch, of course, exists, or wild humans, a lot of them, to ape-like sort of thing, or maybe some crossbreed of the two, and whatever it is, right at the end of the day. And there's different variations of these worldwide, but they're all either primitive humans, ape men of some sort, combination thereof, right? Like it's all the same like phenomena, right? And also the hypertrichosis feral people are a certain amount of these sort of sightings as well, right? But all in all, they is how do I say that? Like it's there's so many of these that like to insinuate that, including when he got photographs there. I mean, I'm telling you, folks, that is a real human of some sort, like some kind of mini person. It isn't a doll. No dolls existed in the 1950s, 40s, 30s, any decades you could ever find that had stretchy skin like this that could do these kinds of things and with that meticulous of features and everything. Not happening. You can't find anything remotely like this in human existence. I have no idea of the origin of this above photo, so I'm not going to comment on that. I mean, it could be a real German gray alien guy. Maybe it is. Maybe it's right. I don't know, but I know I found the original newspaper. They shut it off, and then they didn't even give like. Seemingly, they just ignored it. Right, so talk about cover up is even more covered up than a lot of them. Another one that none of them talk about, like the Giorgio and all, every week it's the same thing. Roswell. So, yeah, so what? I mean, there's many other ones, right? And that they should, investigate some other ones that are much more compelling. There was a 1930s ones in Switzerland where this space alien lands on this ice mountain. And I mean, this is no way that some guy got all these contraptions out there by himself. You really see a space alien come out of this thing, and they didn't have the ability to do the CGI stuff like they do now. And clearly, this thing is like the really big compared to the mountain. It's right beside it. It lands on an edge of this ice field, right? And I mean, it's astonishing. It gives you the creeps, right? Like, I mean, so there's some other sort of crashes and landings that these guys should be covering, and this is one of them. This lady here. So this is original one of the two photographs that exist, but the first one I found was when the crash happened, and they seem to shut up. I don't find anything like further on a week later or anything like. It all seems to be like just like as if it doesn't exist anymore, right? And that sort of thing like that. So very fascinating, you know, and that sort of thing like that. But you got to admit, she's like very completely undull like of that sort of era, right? And that sort of thing. Like here, the Sun Cook, one of the many names for these little people, are said to even play pranks. One tribesman, while camping near Juneau, would wake up each morning and his shoes tied, but he was camping alone. So he would freaking out on this sort of thing. And, so very strange. The men and women, small people, have been blamed on many vanishings of kids to adults. One that gives me the creeps. I feel so sorry for this lady. She had to move. She couldn't handle living there anymore, right? And that sort of thing like that. But it was in Palmer, Alaska in 2005. A lady was doing her dishes and her daughter was playing in the backyard, and she heard a muffled sound. Then she seen this tiny human-like figure run off with her daughter, never to be seen again. Hundreds of strange vanishings are attributed to these guys, right? And apparently they drag you back to some cave. I mean, I don't know, like if a female, if they're young, if they're gonna try and mate with them or kill them or eat them or whatever, right? Like this, I don't know, right? Like, but I mean, wow. I feel so sorry for that lady. Could you imagine? And can you imagine even trying to tell that to the police? And I know the police, I mean, likely they're going to, be like, oh, yeah, sure, lady, like sort of thing. But maybe not, like, because around there, this stories are so common that you might believe it more, even if you officially can't say that little people exist, right? Sort of thing like that. But I mean, I find this like one of the most scariest sort of little guys out there, right? Like certain areas of the world where they do this kind of thing, though, kidnap people, even little people, right? Like trolls and this kind of stuff, right? Gnomes and all these kinds of ones. They would always warn you in European caves everywhere, don't go to the caves, right? So there's real things out there that seemingly races of little people and possibly even space aliens that visit us, right? And that really there is a more evidence for little people than there is actually Sasquatch, which is crazy, right? You would think that that wouldn't be, right? But I mean, there's actual physical, real skeletons like that you at least then can show that yes, that these people were not every time making up an imaginary leprechaun, that they actually saw a little person at one point in time in humanity out there. These guys existed. I saw a very convincing thing. I saw this strange thing over in this queen in the 15th century, and she had these strange paintings of these little people that apparently she would make them fight like let's say it was like a big snail monster or different like ones like that. They would make them like fight with something like that. So the little guy would have to fight with like a big mouse or something, right? And the royalty would be amused by this and watch it and see which one would be killed, right? And this sort of thing like that. So there's records of this. I mean, that is wacky shit, right? But I mean, they must have really existed, right? So I just don't know the origin of these guys. Are they some little people that just eventually, like the odd child, is born really small, right? So if you get a group of them that and they carry the gene that somehow being isolated, they become even weirder, right? Like living around in a caves and all that. Who knows? Like that kind of thing, right? Like different tribes, right? But I mean, very, very interesting subject. It can't all be mythology. There has to be some background to this, right? And I just don't have a problem, me personally. I mean, there are primitive humans have lived amongst us, even in California, to in the turn of the century, to different areas where people did not know they lived there until very recent, right? Times and that. So they were able, and they're primitive, to hide from us. I suggest the same thing as Sasquatch. And in fact, Sasquatch seems to be way less intelligent in a lot of these groups because they're almost never seen, whilst these guys are a bit more brazen, right? Like, and sometimes in that. And there seems to be more of these hairy. My only problem is that there's multi answers for this, right? You have feral human beings for sure in history that have caused Bigfoot like phenomena. You have hypertrichosis and all these things that could create a Bigfoot like family or guy, right? You have the Neanderthal cavemen raping women and having children with them, and these are proven children where you can't prove that the Neanderthal guy raped them because they didn't find the fathers of these ones, right? But the thing is that the women claim both before they even had well, not one of them because she was in the cave thing, but the other one, and the only reason she survived. See, this is an interesting one. Almost all of these you never, and nobody mentions this, is like how many hundreds of women have been reported, and even men, grabbed by them for seemingly this purpose, right? That almost none you ever hear of that now the tribe is with the girl. Like even imagination wise, I'm surprised this hasn't happened. That if it's imagination, sometimes that certain groups wouldn't, you know what I mean, say like I saw the mother with, and now she looks like a chimp lady and she's more hairy, whatever, right? Like that kind of thing, right? But I suspect that they keep them in the cave. Maybe somehow they're able to keep them alive long enough to have the baby, and maybe they die sometimes because the size of the child is bigger, but somehow the baby survives. Like all kinds of scenarios, because you only need like let's say there's because there's hundreds of people missing each year in these national forests, right? Let's say that 40 overly stimulated Sasquatch are running around, jumping the odd lady and stuff, right? Well then, I mean, out of all of them, only one or two like makes it to adulthood. If you're doing this on a consistent basis over decades and centuries, right? That's enough to keep the action going, right? Because each one may live 50, 60, 80, 100 years. Maybe they live longer in this kind of environment, right? They're not smoking, drinking, hanging out with Justin with the big reefer and all that kind of stuff, right? So they're living a more macho sort of life out in the jungle, right? And that. So these things are hard to know, but they're very interesting, anyways. That there's definitely some kind of reality to some of this stuff, and uh, I would suspect that those police, even with that lady as an example, probably said, "Well, ma'am, would you mind taking like?" And she probably passed that with flying colors, right? Because I mean, you got to like when it would be all up to the police if they really were convinced that no, the mother didn't do it, right? And the lady moved like a few years later, right? Because she was in so much grief, right? She couldn't stand it, right? Like, I mean, and I can't blame her, right? So, I mean, that's horrifying, horrifying. So, all the critics and everybody out there, I mean, somebody or something took that child, nevertheless, right? So, you could say it was a bear. I mean, how could a lady that lives in an area like that with these kinds of creatures coming by every day, moose and bear and everything, and that she can't tell the difference of that and some little troll guy that's furry and running off with her kid, right? Like, I mean, there's something weird there, right? Like you can't like a bear wouldn't be able to carry a child this sort of way, right? They could carry them in the mouth and drag them. There has been cases of that where they didn't kill the child; they just carried the child off and then laid it down, right? It was decided not to hurt it and that sort of thing like that. But I mean, still there's so many of these things and people's like knapsacks and everything where the guy was there, there's little footprints around, and it seems like the guy was dragged off but never to be seen again, right? There's stories like that. So there's something creepy out in those mountains, right, of little people that may still exist and also even from other galaxies. So anyways, we'll cover that on another show, but everybody talks about Roswell. I say Roswell's not even remotely close to this one because there's actual real photograph of the lady, right? And that. So, and two different separate photographs were taken of the same individual here. So, same era as early 1950s, right? Just after the wartime and that sort of thing like that. So, anyways, we'll continue on with some other sort of ones here I wanted to cover. But I mean, you know, there is something to it. I mean, there's enough evidence out there with these little skeletons and different things that there has to be at least some validity to some of these, and we'll cover some more little people. I have some other shows on them and I've always found them fascinating, especially like the Menahuni lady there. That sounds entertaining, and you know ones like that, right? And that sort of thing like that. So, I mean, I like the little people are great, and I certainly wouldn't hurt one. And if I knew where they lived, even if they gave me 100 million, I wouldn't rat them out because they're the poor little guys. They need a home too, right? So, but anyways, whatever the case, there is really some reality to little people, how they occur, like or how long they've really been around. This is hard to know, but anyways, we'll continue on. We're gonna do. I'm only gonna be able to do probably one, so we'll continue on this the next show. But I'm gonna show you this one where the guy doesn't even understand what it is that's doing this, and this film is really. In order for somebody to rig all this, you had to have a lot of tricks up your sleeve, and I just don't believe this. I believe that this guy, again, because of what this creature's doing in a tree and my familiarity that I've talked about in the show. Before any of these films ever existed, you didn't have any really until more recent times because way more everybody has a cell phone, right? And all that. But before a certain point, right, there was way less of this stuff around, right? And people, but now more and more better films are floating around, right? And this is one of them. This is 100% some one or two, possibly two Sasquatch that is in a tree that's freaking this dude out. And I mean, this is not some guys in a suit and they're snapping gigantic trees branches that are super thick like this Queon guy did, right? And so this is what I was talking about. So I left everything where you can hear these snaps and stuff. So it's exactly like the regular film, right? And that's probably about it for this show. And then if you ever have any sightings, of course, you can send cryptozoology sightings at protonmail.com or here on the channel, right? And that and but and we'll continue this on in some other topics as well and things like that. There's a bunch I want to cover that UFO lady sometime and piles of different ones, right? But anyways, this film is extremely convincing for multi reasons, right? Like, and I'm telling you, this is the another real deal where it's an actual authentic, like in the highest probability, a Sasquatch film and possibly even two of them. Now, it's hard for me to tell some parts. It looks like there could be two dudes there, but there's for sure one. And this guy or several, right, gets mad at this dude and they start chucking things at him. And I mean, this is not humans in a suit. Like, it's no, the abilities that they're doing and snapping us off like nothing, like, I mean, is insane, right? Like, no human being could do that. So unless they had this really rigged, like some wild setups, right? And why would you do this? The guy doesn't even know they're Sasquatch, right? He's completely messed up by this and wondering and knowing that it can't be a bear because of the height of these things and what it's doing. Like, is this like one of the better films I've ever seen. So even though you don't see the guy or guys that much, all in all, like, and I'm sure if I lit this up and did some other things with it, that maybe some more of these guys, because I suspect there really is two of them there. But I mean, all I can mostly see at least is one, right? And the other is iffy sometimes. Is that really somebody else or is it the same guy, right? But whatever the case, anyways, it's not any humans in a suit. So that's all I can say. So, anyways, hopefully you enjoy that. And then, like I said, we'll continue on this probably to next. So I was going to show several, but I don't think we'll have time. Okay, folks, look at this. There is a Bigfoot-like creature of some sort. This guy doesn't realize it's a Sasquatch. There's nothing else that can do that. But
and the first time when I got up under them trying to figure out what it was, they started breaking limbs off and throwing them at me.
So they're breaking and throwing limbs at him, like the Quebec guy. Hear that? Nobody can do that. No person can do that kind of strike like that. They're snapping it right off. Look at that. This is insane.
What in Jesus' name is doing this?
You can see in the background there.
Oh my God, he just took.
There's some kind of black guy there. He's furry. Right?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
See him move his arm there? That this is not a person in a suit. Nobody can do this stuff.
It's got to be I don't even think a bear would have a chance in Hades. They're doing this.
It's totally insane. Most interesting thing I've ever seen. It's very convincing. This guy doesn't even realize it's Bigfoot.
I think he just hit the ground, which means he's about to face me on foot.
Can do that. It can't be a bear.
And I don't really want to wrestle with somebody.
So you got to admit that Sasquatch film was really convincing. I mean, you'd have to go through a lot of sneakery here to, I don't know, do all that. I mean, the creature, even seemingly, at least one of them, jumps down seemingly, like out of the tree. I mean, who can leap like that down that far, right? This guy was paranoid that the thing was going to come and attack him, right? So I don't even know what happens after this, right? It's sad that the guy did that, right? Like, but I mean, people are, you know, well, at the beginning, remember of the show, I was talking about, I finally remembered the name of this silly thing. Okay, so the real words would go, "It's so funny we don't talk anymore," right? Like it's some old famous song, right? But when I first heard it, and my buddy, we both thought that the guy was saying, "Disco Bunny, how we don't talk anymore." So we really believed for years that this song was because disco was a bigger thing then and all that stuff, that these guys were so desperate for a hit that they come up with this silly disco bunny, right? Like, so in our minds, right? Like, you know, so I mean, it's funny how a lot of like famous songs, if you ask a bunch of people, a lot of them don't actually have the lyrics correct most of the time, right? So as I got older, I really tried to make sure that even ones that I'm hearing something else, right? That, you know, like, and then finally find the words to make sure what I'm hearing, right? And a few times, I mean, some of them, and that was one of them, right? Like, it really sounded like the guy was always singing "Disco Bunny," you know, like, so, I mean, hilarious, right? Like, and I'm going to talk about an unknown cryptid. From my region, a couple of them that are, you know, a crocodilian to alligator like sort of creatures, right? That are not known by just about anybody out there, sort of thing. So it's interesting, right? Like in that sort of things like that. And we got some, but I mean, it was funny, right? It just finally dawned on me. I couldn't remember the name of the song, right? And I kept trying to see somebody ever singing it or anything, right? And then finally, I envisioned this one area where I was fishing, and this guy had this chip stand, and the fish were like pets. You could get these monsters to hit because all the tourists would throw in like ice cream cones and pieces of hot dog buns and all this, and these dudes would hang around there, right? And knew that there was a free chow source constantly, right? And that sort of thing like that. So it was a great place to fish in the earliest times, right? And that, but of course, the government, as usual, governments, right? They shut it down and perceived it, I guess, as a threat to, tourists, that they're going to get fatter by eating all these fat fries and everything, right? Sort of stuff going on there, right? But anyways, I mean, so lots of people get these things wrong, and if you can hear this AI version thing of Back in Black, and it's absolutely spectacular and creepy. And creepy in the sense that I don't like that it was made this way, right? But I refuse to believe that the voice, even if they got that voice from somebody, right? So whoever these two are, kudos to them. They can friggin' sing, man. Just right up there with, some of the best I've ever heard, right? Like that sort of thing like that. So, you know, there's some real talent out there in all kinds of genres, right? That is around nowadays. That even though they're using some of this fakery stuff that I don't like, at the same time do create some pretty, really like good material, right? Like sort of things, But you got to admit that Bigfoot film is like extremely convincing and multi layers, right? Because how is it that the height that they were even at, like, I mean, it's hard to stay up on those thinner like branches, but this guy was breaking up, and this if there was two of them, right? But at least, anyways, for sure, there's one guy. You see him, and even his arm in one point, and different things, right? And the guy's furry. I mean, what else could it be, right? Like, so I mean, to me, like, I'm not even going to debate on this, and I know it's not a guy in a suit, unless that they came up with some really genius gimmicks here that to do this, but I don't believe so because the snapping sounds of each one sounds correct. Like that what I heard like in Quillon and that, and we saw the evidence of them this guy doing this, right? Like the next day, right? And I've never been so scared still to this date nearly in my life, a few other times close, but in this sort of range, but I was really creeped out of going in there. So I already thought in the 70s here that these guys aren't as friendly as you think, right? Like so, I had this by my own because this guy sounded insane, man. Like really, he sounded like different, more like upset about something, but uh but he had the vocalness of that power like you hear on the Sierra Nevada recording. It's very similar in a lot of ways, but very different because this guy was like, like he was like peeved off, right? And then he started smashing all these branches. I mean, it's something burned in my memory, every little bit of it. And every day after that, I was petrified of walking around in there, right? Like, I mean, even near this forest, right? I mean, because what if this nut comes back, right? Like, I mean, so I certainly, and I mean, we couldn't stay in the regular place because it was loaded of skunk smell, right? From this catastrophe of giving a family of skunks decided to blast this sort of cottage that we were in, right? And got upset. And anyway, we had to stay outside, right? And that sort of thing like that. And then the next night, I think it was that's when this, ape man showed up, right? So I mean, it was the wildest adventure ever to me. I still, out of all the crazy stuff I've ever seen, when you see a guy screaming and running for his life, and the guy is like with great big like even pieces of branches and stuff that penetrated right through the clothing, you couldn't do that unless something really like gave you a good push, like a little bit, right? But this guy's doing like a Bruce Lee like thing where he just went right up to his face and just gave him like a little shove, right? But this was powerful enough to give him a monster black eye, slam him to the ground. The guy bolts and he's screaming, he's after me, right? And all this and this, you hear this roaring in the bush, right? And then all of a sudden, and you hear him breaking the breath. Like, I mean, it was insane, right? Like, so, I mean, if you were in my situation, you would believe in them too and what I saw in that Kickapoo Creek place, right? So, no matter what any Joe Nichols like person wants to tell me out there, I know personally that there's no way they couldn't exist, right? From historical wise. And I'd still believe in them anyways, even if I never had these run-ins because of just the historics, right, to it, right? Like, but anyways, we'll continue on with this on the next show there. So have a good day.